For more Microsoft Webcast, you can go to microsoft.com/webcast. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to our Msdn webcast today, entitled Business Intelligence with Lynn Langent. I would like to introduce today's hosts and presenters, Susan Wisowaty and Glen Gordon. Susan and Glen are both Msdn developer evangelists for the Microsoft Corporation, and you both now have the floor.
Great. Thanks. I want to add my welcome to that, and thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to stop by and do a little geek speaking with us. As was mentioned before, Geekspeak webcasts are driven by your questions, so we want to give you the opportunity as early as possible to start typing your questions on business intelligence into the Q&A panel, and then we'll work on those. And my co-host on Geekspeak, as ever, is Susan Wisowaty. What's up, Susan?
Hey, Glenn. Oh, my gosh, I'm waiting for spring. I think today's the first day of spring.
It is.
It was -2 here this morning up in Vermont. So.
Oh, my gosh. See, I'm down in Atlanta, and I'm wearing shorts, and I got the windows open. The pollen coming any minute.
That's great. That's great. I'm happy for you.
So no snow anymore yet?
Oh, we still have plenty of snow on the ground. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I just want to add my welcome. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. Today is going to be an awesome session. We are really happy to have our special guest here today, who we will introduce in just a moment.
Yeah, so I pulled up a slide first. In this webcast, it's really just helpful to know who the faces are. Susan and I have our mugshots here on the screen and a little bio. Susan and I present for the Msdn events team, so we do live Msdn events around the country. And in fact, our guest today is a new member of the Msdn events team. It is Lynn Langent. How are you, Lynn?
I'm great, thanks.
Cool. So now we got a bio slide up for you, but why don't you just tell folks a little bit about why you're interested in business intelligence, where you came from in the industry, why you were so excited to join the Msdn events team, that sort of thing?
Sure, great. I've been on board with Microsoft for a couple months now, delivered my first round of events on the Vista Office launch. Prior to that, I was both a Microsoft certified trainer as well as a small business owner excuse me, for many years. During that time, I architected many solutions using the business intelligence tools available from Microsoft. Most recently, last year, architected 3 production solutions using analysis services, reporting services, and integration services out of SQL 2005. I've also recently completed a book, as you can see up on the slide there. It's called Foundations of SQL Server 2005 Business Intelligence, and it will be published and available through A-Press next month, April 23rd.
That's awesome. So April 23rd is the day it hits the shelves?
That's right.
And it'll still be -2 in Vermont on April 23rd.
I hope not. And Lynn, you're out in Southern California, right?
I am.
So it's probably not winter there.
No, we don't do winter.
And you've been presenting events out there.
I have.
To folks. So it's I want to also just welcome you to the team, and we're very excited to have you on the team, and we're very excited to have an expert on business intelligence on also. I've done a bit of BI work myself, and I did a 6-part series on reporting services last year as well. But I'm really excited today to learn about a lot of the stuff that I haven't really delved deeply into, especially analysis services and integration services. So this will be great. And Lynn says she's got some great demos to show us today, too.
I do. Although this is a question-driven format, and I certainly welcome all the participants to ask a question at any time, and I will respond to that as quickly as possible. Because BI lends itself so well to demoing, I do have quite a few ad hoc demos available for you guys today. And I think if Susan and Glenn are good with it, I'm just going to actually start with a demo because I'm not seeing any questions in the queue.
Actually, I see one now. It's from our attendee whose name is C. I guess that's the screen name. He wants to know where to buy the book. And just in general, any links to things like books or white papers or articles or online demos, we're going to put all those links up in one big blog post after this Geekspeak. So you'll be able to go to our blog at blogs.msdn.com/geekspeak and download any resources related to today's webcast. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Let's go to the anchor slide here.
Okay,
and let's just start talking about business intelligence conceptually,
Okay.
where people should think about that in the architecture of their applications, or what tool sets are involved, that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, BI is not new in terms of the SQL product stack. It's actually been around this is the third version. And in 7, it started by being something called the OLAP server, or OLAP services, or OLAP server, which was an included component with SQL Server at that time, 7. That has subsequently evolved to what is now called analysis services, which is a separately installable component that's available with the standard and enterprise editions of SQL Server. Analysis services is really the core component in the BI offering, in that it is the data store. It allows you to format and set up your data in a way that is optimized for read-only or decision support, and this is called a cube or a data warehouse. So analysis services is sort of the core building block in the stack. It's interesting, though, however, that there are other tools in the suite, notably integration services, which is the newest version of DTS, or data transformation services, and reporting services that will use both analysis services data, or cubes, as well as traditional relational data, or SQL Server data, as data sources. So one of the first considerations when you're thinking about implementing BI is which data stores you're going to use. And the primary consideration that you're going to think about there is, where is the expertise in-house, and how much data do you have? What are your resources in terms of servers? From an implementation standpoint, most of the customers that I've been working with over the past 2-3 years have chosen to implement both analysis services and, of course, the relational store. So in other words, 2 copies of the data.
That makes sense. And that's, I think, historically, what has it been called, OLTP, or online transaction?
Yeah, OLTP is SQL Server, and then OLAP, or online analytical processing, is your analysis services component.
And it's a really good point to make, Lynn, too, because I think I know with reporting services there are a lot of misconceptions. Because it's called SQL Server reporting services, a lot of folks are under the assumption that it's for reporting on SQL Server data only. And one of the really cool things about these tools is that you can make connections to other data stores. So while SQL Server reporting services requires SQL Server to store the metadata for those reports, you can report on any number of formats of data.
Yeah, one kind of interesting point of fact is that analysis services is now the #1 OLAP server, not only for SQL Server as a source, but also for Oracle.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, the reason is
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because of the TCO, or the total cost of ownership, is tremendously more efficient for most businesses, using analysis services as the OLAP store.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big pieces of the message, is that these BI tools are fantastic for all different kinds of data stores that you have. Yep.
So that's sort of the first consideration, deciding to use analysis services. Now, once you've done that, an interesting change in this release is that with analysis services, you get both the OLAP store, or the cube container mechanism, if you will, but you also get another component that I particularly want to talk about today because it's very new, and that's the data mining component. Now, that was available in a limited sort of implementation in SQL 2000. In 2005, we've really enhanced it and made it more usable, and also much more powerful, because we've dramatically improved the number of what are called algorithms, or processing methods. And I wanted to take some time during our talk today and actually show data mining as it exists in both analysis services, and I think most interestingly, brand new, is the ability to use Excel 2007 as a native client for data mining.
Oh, excellent. And that actually is a great lead into, we've got a couple of questions in the queue that maybe we could just get to before we move on to the demo.
Okay.
Lisa is asking, do end users usually access analysis services directly, or do they mainly access the cubes developed in MSAS via another tool?
Okay, yeah, that is a really great question, and it's a key part of any implementation. from the simplest possible case, you can actually use Excel, either 2003 or preferably 2007, because it has greatly enhanced capabilities via the pivot table interface to be a cube client, and as I just said, a data mining client. Data mining client capabilities are only available in 2007, so that could drive your implementation decision. You can use other clients. SQL Server Reporting Services 2005 has very deep support for cubes, including a visual MDX or multi-dimensional expression query designer, which makes working with cubes much, much easier than it was in previous versions.
Yes.
You can also go directly to the object model and code directly against that with whatever client application you're interested in working with. There are also third-party client applications. Another sort of interesting thing is one of the market leaders is something called ProClarity, which we recently bought and will be part of a new product coming out later this year, which is currently in CTP, called Performance Point Server.
Oh, interesting. We're going to call it Performance Point Server.
It used to be called Business Scorecards Manager.
Right. Okay,
Yep.
Good. And speaking of Excel, Mark has a question here. He says, Excel with data mining appears to be very interesting news. Are there any samples available for me to use with VS Office tools? And I think that's probably something that we should maybe compile a good resource list and post. What do you think, Lynn?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I do have on my former company's website, I actually have a list of links for samples, and I can just give that to you guys to put on the Geekspeak follow-up. Also, generally in terms of samples, the samples that ship with SQL Server really for the whole product are very, very rich, but particularly for analysis services, and which of course includes data mining. So what I'm going to be showing in the demos later in this talk are all from the included samples.
Oh, awesome. Great.
Hey, Lynn, can you clarify a little bit? What does the term data mining mean specifically?
Sure. Data mining is using, as I said, algorithms or specific calculation methods to discover patterns in data, to group data into groups or clusters, and depending on the selected algorithm, also possibly to predict values.
So what kind of scenarios would you use that?
So it's everything from detection of fraud. For example, all major credit card companies already use this. If you've ever gotten a call from your credit card provider saying, hey, there's some charges made in X city or at X restaurant, did you actually make them? What the technology they're using is data mining, because they're looking at all the transaction history, and if there is situations or cases, it's called in data mining, called outliers, or basically unusual cases, they will actually then generally call you to verify whether or not it's fraudulent or theft. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is sales marketing, where you're trying to figure out how to spend marketing dollars for future campaigns. So you might want to look at past campaigns and see what have been the best predictors of, for example, buying a car or something. So what factors correlate to people who bought cars? Where do they shop? What TV shows do they watch? What magazines do they read? So on and so forth.
Okay.
You know, Lynn, I've heard it. Tell me if this is accurate or not. But what I've heard data mining, and I've never really done any in-depth work with data mining. But what I've heard it described is as it's being able to ask the questions that you didn't know you wanted to ask, whereas when you query data directly, you know exactly what you want to ask. You set up the criteria, and you're expecting to get results that match that criteria. But with data mining, we have a mechanism of asking questions that we're not really sure, what that's going to be or what the results that's going to be. Is that accurate?
That's a pretty good way to say it. I would even broaden it more. With traditional data warehousing, as you said, you're validating your hypothesis, or you know what question you want answered. With data mining, you may not even know what question to ask.
Great. Awesome.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of questions that popped up. Sean has put in a question, will the new BI tools and data mining tools be accessible through Orcus? That's a great question.
Meaning that he's wanting to write a custom client application using .NET Framework?
We'll go with that assumption. If that's different, Sean, let us know.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And the answer would be yes.
Okay.
Basically, instead of working with ADO.NET, you're working with ADO-MD or ADO multidimensional, because what the object that you're working with in analysis services is not a data set, rather it's a cell set, because it's multidimensional. Again, most listeners are probably familiar with an Excel pivot table, which is really a representation of a flattened cube.
Right.
So that's kind of the way that you do that.
Okay. And there's another question hanging out here from HK. Is there any way to tie a business intelligence project to Visual SourceSafe, similar to the way you can build a database project, or do you have to somehow script it out to keep track of changes?
That's a really great question. Yes, in production, we do recommend that you use VSS or some other source control tool. One thing that's new in this release, which is really powerful, is something called XMLA script. And this is the ability to script out the structure or the metadata of the cubes and the components of the cubes, which are called dimensions and attributes and so on and so forth, as structured XMLA script. So that's analogous to the T-SQL DDL code, like the create table, so on and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's in a structured XML language in this version only, called XMLA.
Right. So you could version that, and you could do source code management of that.
Yep.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
Yep.
That's great. Hey, Lynn, I know you've got some great demos. Should we jump into one?
Okay, sure. Let me just grab my desktop here.
Great.
And hopefully everybody can see that okay.
It looks good to me. I'm looking at something that says SQL Server data mining.
Okay. So what I'm going to
If you're watching, by the way, if you're watching, you can press F5 to maximize your screen.
So what I'm going to start with is the sample that ships with analysis services, and there are two versions of the sample. There's a standard edition version and there's an enterprise edition, and when you are starting to work with this, you should be careful to match to the edition that you are that have installed, because there's a substantial difference in feature set between the standard and the enterprise editions.
Good point.
And that is fairly well documented on the web, but if people are really interested in that, I really recommend that they pick up my book, because I didn't find that in the literature very well documented, and I made a particular point in my book of doing a very, very detailed feature comparison so that people who were interested in getting into BI could make the right purchasing decision in terms of the edition.
Great. Good to know.
So what I've done here is I've got Visual Studio 2005 open, and I've loaded the sample inside of Visual Studio 2005. Now, the way that Analysis Services works is if you have Visual Studio installed on your particular development computer, then when you connect to or work with Analysis Services, there will be a set of templates that are added that, and I'll just show you what it looks like, that relate to business intelligence. However, if you don't have Visual Studio installed, it is not required. That's a common question that I get. Must I have Visual Studio to work with the BI stack? And no, it is not required.
Right.
You'll get a Visual Studio-like interface if you don't have it installed. And you can see the very first project type is Business Intelligence Projects, and inside of there are 6 different templates by default. And what I've done here is we're working with an Analysis Services project. Just as a point of information, a substantial change between 2005 and previous versions of SQL Server is that you now also use this Visual Studio-like interface to design integration services or the new DTS packages.
That is different, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's often surprising to people, so I'll just point it out that to design it, you use this.
Yep.
But in any case, so here we are, and we have a number of items as part of the sample. The first is a data source, which is simply a connection to the sample underlying source database. Now, this database is part of the samples in 2005. It's not installed by default, so if you do want to work with this, you need to select that during the installation or install it later. And notice that the name is not just AdventureWorks, it's AdventureWorks DW. And there's a specific reason for that. That is that the source structure of the relational database is in a different format than a traditional OLTP or a highly normalized. It's in a structure called a star schema. which is much desired when you're building a data warehouse. Now, this whole topic is a really, really big topic, modeling for a data warehouse, that I probably can't take on in the amount of time that we have.
Right.
Sure.
Again, there's lots of resources out there available, also in my book. But I'll just summarize it kind of quickly to say that it's a formal way of having a denormalized or a deliberately duplicated data store that is really important to use with analysis services. So this is provided as part of the sample. So AdventureWorks DW. And then on top of that, there are these data source views. Now these are kind of interesting. These are like relational views in that, in essence, they are queries, although they're represented visually. So you can see that we've got various structures. These are tables basically shown. Now the reason for these is that you may not have administrative control over the source databases that you're going to use in analysis services.
Right.
If you're working in a small shop and you're the admin over everything, then frankly you're just going to, make a copy of whatever there, or a view. You're not copying the data. Make a view of whatever the source data is. The DSVs come into play more when perhaps you're the OLAP administrator in a Oracle shop and you're not the Oracle DBA. So what they allow you to do is to define layers of abstraction in analysis services that you wouldn't have had permission to do in Oracle.
Nice.
That's the point of it. Okay. So once you create these data source views, and these are using the star schema structure, which basically consists of two things: something called a dimension table and a fact table. Other kind of nice things that you can do in here, which again, if you don't have administrative permissions on the source data, it's very helpful, is you can what is called explore the data. So this can help you to understand the data better, so that when you're building your multidimensional structures, you can do so intelligently. And what this is showing here is, for this particular table, what the source data is, and then it's shown visually. So pivot table, for example, and I'm not going to bother with a chart.
Oh, that's nice.
And a pivot chart. So
that's
yeah,
really
so that
nice.
if you don't have, if you don't have administrative ability on source data, you can pull it together here in analysis services, take a look at it, and then build intelligently.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, so once you do that, then you build a cube. Now, one of the challenges in working with analysis services is understanding the interface, because although it's a visual interface, it's one of the more complex visual interfaces in any Microsoft product. I mean, just as an example, you can see under the Cube Builder here, we have the Cube Builder page, and then we have sub-tabs. There are 7, 8, 9 of them. And under each sub-tab, we then have sub-menus.
Yeah, there's a lot there, isn't
there? Yeah, there really is. So one of the things that I will always tell people when they're just getting started with this is be patient with yourself, because it takes a little bit of time to get through this interface. Again, one of the reasons I wrote the book is I didn't find a good reference anywhere on the interface, and I paid particular attention in my book to documenting, giving people shortcuts and tips so that they could get through the interface.
That's great. I was just going to ask you if you could sort of outline the how to get started using this interface in your book.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, very much so.
Good.
So once you've built your cube, there's actually a built-in browser, which looks quite a bit like a pivot table. Now, this is not for end users. This is for you as a developer to be able to review your work and look at it from an end user standpoint. And it's all built on the sort of the pivot table paradigm. So, drag in whatever it is you're measuring, and then drag in whatever hierarchy you want to look at. Hierarchy is just a grouping, and then you can drill down, and if you want to, this is similar though to what end user tools would look like.
Okay.
So
if someone were going to use Excel and design a pivot table and use the data source as one of these analysis services cubes, it would be very similar to what you're doing here.
Yeah.
Right? Because the interface in Excel for creating pivot tables is really just this great, drag and drop.
Yep. And then a tip for people who are interested in doing this, you have to install the optional Office component Microsoft Query in order to get the data connector.
Good to know.
Yeah, so that's just a common thing people will forget. And also, if you're trying to figure out which client to use, I do recommend that you, if you haven't already migrated to Office 2007, that you take a look at 2003 and 2007 side by side, because we've invested a whole lot of time and effort in making pivot tables in general substantially easier to use in 2007, and that really could drive your implementation decision, especially if you have a very large user base.
Good point.
So anyway, so you've got this cube here, and this is all relatively similar to the previous version of Analysis Services.
Mm-hmm.
What is new, and what I mentioned earlier that I also want to show here, is this data mining section. And this is all included in the samples. So we have samples of 5 different algorithms in this particular case. And I'm just going to open one up. What's interesting is when you open this, you see a complete different designer, and most importantly, complete different browsers. The data mining browsers are much more visual. Let me go out of here and go to the viewer. And they're specific for the algorithms. So in the case of this particular algorithm type, which is called a decision tree, what we see instead of rows and columns of numbers is we see this visual designer here that shows us what are called nodes. And what we're looking at is a model of who buys bicycles and what are the characteristics of the customers that buy bicycles. And you'll see the first level node talks about the number of cars owned. So that's the most correlated factor. And then the second level node is how old someone is. So that's the third most correlated. And then the fourth is commute distance. Now this is a relatively simple model. Oftentimes data mining is applied to massive sets of data where maybe you're merging or something, or you're acquiring a competitor, and you get all this tremendously huge amount of rich data, but you don't really know what to do with it. So data mining is a great solution in that particular case, because you take all this data, run it through some mining models, and it'll show you the correlations and the patterns in the data.
So going back to the thing that we talked about in the slides about not knowing what question you're going to ask, somebody might come at this data and say, I want to see how many cars are owned by people who buy bicycles. And what you're saying here is, what is the factor that is the highest relevance among people who buy bicycles? And here it shows up that the number of cars equals 1. So that's an example of the question that you don't know that you wanted to ask.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Another thing that's cool about data mining is what you will commonly do is you will throw more than one algorithm at it. Data mining is very creative in that, although obviously the algorithms are mathematically exact, data mining itself is more an art than a science. Because what you will commonly do is you will start with more general algorithms that simply group the data together into buckets, so you can kind of figure out what's correlated, and that's something like a decision tree that's shown here. And then you will move to more specific algorithms, things like, if I open up this market basket, which show you what are called item sets. And what this means are, the reason it's called market basket is because it's what people put in their shopping cart together. So a business implementation of this is if you've ever been on Amazon and you get you might like the X book or whatever.
Right.
That's that. So you move from something that's very general, like the decision trees or the clustering, to something more specific as you understand your data better. So kind of an interesting implementation. And again, the viewer is going to be different here as well. So in this particular case, on the item set, we've got probably the most interesting one is the dependency network. What this shows is what correlates to what. So it might not be able to see it very well, but what I've highlighted here is somebody that buys a water bottle. What else do they buy? And then this is sort of a cool thing. You can see this is starting with the strongest going to the weakest going to the strongest links.
Nice.
So I actually, before I went into IT, I was a business executive for 10 years. And I wish I would have had this in meetings.
No kidding,
it would have saved a lot of time.
Hey, Lynn, we have a question here. The question is, what did you say the you might like product X is? And we've been talking about a lot of products. I'm wondering if he's...
I think it's about the Amazon question.
How does that work? Okay.
In other words, you shop for something, you put it in your cart, and the system says, oh, you just ordered the season 1 of Lost. Well, you might also like Heroes or something like that.
Yeah. What that means is this particular data mining algorithm, which is called, I always call it Market Basket, but the formal name is Microsoft Association Rules, allows you to take data and to determine what items are grouped together, or item sets, when you set it up.
Yep, great. And just getting back to what you cover in your book about data mining, is this something that somebody new to data mining could actually read and sort of understand if they're, never done any data mining before?
Yeah, my book is targeted towards people who have never used the BI stack.
Great.
It's for the newbies.
Yes, but it has an appropriate level of depth so that you can actually implement a solution and use it. It's not just so general that it's just conceptual. It's a big focus on the practical, because in my consulting business, that's primarily what I did. I worked with companies who had heard about BI and data mining and all the great stuff in the BI stack and really didn't know where to start.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting about that, because I found that too in my consulting practice, is that organizations usually have very specific skill sets, and while they might have a lot of DBAs and they might have a lot of programmers, doing business intelligence stuff is not always a core set of skills that they might have within their staff.
Right. What I have found, and what I was really doing, is that I was coming in as a BI architect and an educator, and I was working with the dev teams and the DBAs and helping them with their architectures, either designing it myself and then they were validating it, or they were designing it and I was validating it, and providing them with some core training and showing them some samples that were specific to their particular business. Once we'd gone through that step, then we would usually quickly build a prototype cube or two, and quickly was defined in usually a month or less. Sometimes even shorter if it was a really small cube, so that we could get proof of concept and get a better understanding so the requirements could be realistic.
Right.
One of the challenges with BI is that so few people have worked with it in production to have the SMEs and the business decision makers provide the developers with realistic requirements. Everybody has to be educated, because people don't know what it can do.
You're absolutely right. I've seen that too. And along those lines, I know what we're looking at in your demo is really about the models and creating those models and the structure behind that and the algorithms and so forth. But there's a question here about the client tools for data mining. So what are the client tools that somebody would use for data mining?
Oh, that just leads nicely into my next demo.
Good. Well, we'll give you your $20 later.
And I'll just pop right over there.
Great.
So something that we've just very recently released, matter of fact, the final release was literally about 3 weeks ago. It was in CTB for a while. Is the SQL Server 2005 data mining add-ins. And you can see here that once you've downloaded and installed them, that you get this on your Start menu. Now, before you do this, you do need to grab Service Pack 2 for SQL Server and for analysis services.
Okay.
It is physically possible to run this without Service Pack 2, but it's not optimal, so very important. So then you'll get the Visio template, and I'm going to show this at some point as well, that there's a Visio component. You'll get documentation, you'll get the sample Excel data, and then the server configuration utility, which is just a little wizard that helps you to make the connection from Excel to analysis services.
Oh, nice.
Now, once you've installed this component, then inside of Excel, this is Excel 2007, and I realize that some people might not have seen this at all yet, so I'll just take a minute and show it. Of course, being Office 2007, we have the new ribbon menus. What happens once you install the data mining components is you get a new tab on the ribbon called data mining.
Ah, very cool.
So yeah, so this tab is not part of the default Office Excel installation. You have to install these add-ins. You also get, when you're in the sample data, a context-sensitive tool added into the table tools called Analyze.
Oh.
So there's two new sections that you get. Now this Analyze section of the table tools is actually brand new. This wasn't even in the CTP. Okay. So this is completely new, and there is a great webcast that somebody from, actually it's Jamie McLennan from the data mining group has done on this section and the Analyze section, and I'll give that to you guys. So people who are interested, it's about an hour long, and it's nice detailed on how exactly everything works. I'll do as much as I can in the time, but it really needs its own little hour to go through the whole thing.
Yeah, great. We'll post that on the blog too with all the rest of the resources.
Yeah. So to answer the question, what can you use as a data mining tool? Excel is a terrific tool. There are other tools out there, by the way, that are also very powerful. But of course, with Excel, the price is usually right because most of us own it already. And with this release, the power is pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Just to be clear on this, this is the only version that is supports this. Only 2007. 2003, there is not support for data mining. Okay. So you can see on the ribbon we have various sections here. And the way this was designed is to support the data mining lifecycle. There's actually best practices out there. It's a consortium or a group called CRISP, and I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's basically data mining lifecycle. So it has in it, this follows it. So you prepare the data, you model the data, you validate the data, and then you manage it.
Gotcha.
So that's where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you need to do is you need to make a connection. So I've already done this, but just to show you how it works, you just say new and put in the server name, and then you select a catalog and give it a name and then test it. So it's just very simple. You're just making a OLEDB connection to the analysis server.
Mm-hmm.
This little wizard for that. And then once you've got it, you test your connection and you're good to go. Something that's very interesting, again, that's only in the final version, wasn't in the CTP, is the trace capability. For those of you who are going to want to programmatically connect to analysis services, what this tracer does is very similar to the profiler in SQL Server. It captures query activity. It's not as verbose as profiler.
Mm-hmm.
It's only capturing the query activity, but it's just kind of interesting to look at too.
Yeah. Because
you can see the syntax behind the connections, and I ran some earlier just to put some information in here.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So Lynn, this is interesting. CRISP DM stands for Cross Industry Standard Process for Data Mining.
Thank you.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember what it was.
And we'll put a link to that. This is actually a Wikipedia article. That put a link to that on our Geekspeak blog.
Oh, and while I'm in the tracer here, I'll just mention as well that in SQL Server 2005, Profiler now supports profiling analysis services activity, which is just tremendously helpful for developers. I'm sure a lot of the folks listening here are SQL Server developers and probably already use Profiler and SQL Server, and it's just great that capability has been added for analysis services.
Yeah, that's great.
So in any case, there's some sample data here that I've got, and this first section here is part of the CRISP lifecycle, and it allows you to look at data, clean data, and partition data. Now, the data that they're talking about here is primarily Excel data. So one thing that's a little bit tricky in understanding this is, yes, the data mining ribbon allows you to use Excel as a client for analysis services data, but it also allows you to integrate Excel data with analysis services data. So what do I mean by that? Well, you might have a spreadsheet that has particular information about a marketing campaign or something. Well, you might then also have a data mining model on the analysis services server that has a history of all the marketing campaigns. And you want to take the current marketing campaign results and compare that with the historical values. So that's why you have this ability to apply some of these data mining techniques to Excel data.
Wow, that is very powerful.
It is. It's really,
wow.
Yeah. So Explore data, and all these wizards are extremely well documented. I was very impressed as I was reviewing this and working on it as part of my book in the level of documentation. It's not common across all of our products. So there's been a really concerted effort to make this more accessible to more of our customers. So you just pick whatever column you want to look at, and in this particular case, let's say we want to understand income better. And what this does is it just gives us a quick and dirty view.
Oh my gosh.
It's just the idea is fast analysis. So we want to group this into 8 buckets, we want to group it into 7 buckets, 6 buckets. I mean, it's just intuitive and simple.
Oh.
So
I've never seen anything like that, quite honestly.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is note the button here, Add New Column. See, what this allows you to do is almost mimic SSIS type behavior. In other words, integration services where you'd apply some sort of query with a case statement, but just without having to write any code or anything.
Right.
So you've got Explore, you've got Clean, which allows you to get rid of what are called outliers or exception cases, and Relabel, which just allows you to rename. So again, it substitutes for, here, I'll show you what it looks like. So it substitutes for a query. So I want to take, I don't know, education, and maybe you have, data that's not particularly clean. So previously you would have maybe used DTS or SSIS, and now you can relabel and just put in the new labels. So real simple. Another thing that you'll sometimes do in data mining is you'll create what's called a training set and a test set. So what that means, and again, it's very well documented here, is you take source data and you're going to use some of the data to train a mining model, but then you're going to hold some data back as a validating set, basically. So this allows you to split your data out based on whatever parameters you specify. Again, very, very SSIS-like behavior here.
Yeah.
Sampling and oversampling. Again, oversampling is, as it says, to balance your data distribution. So that's your sort of data preparation. Now once you've done that and your data is ready to go, then inside of here, and you have to have permissions. This is set up when you initially establish the connection to analysis services. You then can create a mining model either locally, and this is an option when you set up the connection, creating a temporary mining model, or you can actually create a mining model on analysis services through Excel. And what you're doing here is, this is the classification, which is analogous to if you created a new mining structure.
I'm sort of blown away by everything that they have put into that Excel client.
I know, when I first saw it,
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because I'm seeing this for the first time, but I'm just sitting here going, oh my gosh, you're kidding.
Yeah.
The implication of that is
So you can see this is how you would make a clustering data mining model in analysis services. You just go, right-click and then say New Mining Model, select Clustering, and then there's a level of complexity in here. I mean, it's not terrible, but you have to know things like case and nested and so on and so forth. Now, if you're in Excel, you're doing the same thing here.
Oh my gosh.
But it's a lot simpler. So here's the temporary model. Enabling drill through allows you to look at the supporting information. So you can actually right-click on a summary cell, and then you can see all the support, the values that have been summed up to create that cell. So then you go ahead and create the model. So these basically are aliases for analysis services algorithms. And then if you go into advanced, then you can see that you actually get the analysis services interface right inside of
Wow.
Excel.
Now I'm beginning to understand why, we went through all these launch events and we're talking about Office and we're talking about integration with BI. Now I'm finally really beginning to understand what that means.
Yeah.
And you know what else is a tremendous thing that you can do with Excel is the ribbons and the buttons, all the commands you put on the ribbon, that's all customizable from Visual Studio Tools for Office.
Right.
So this would be sort of a generic solution, but you could really customize this and put your own buttons up there for a specific customer solution that takes advantage of the functionality of all the data mining and does some custom stuff on top of that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I'm particularly excited by is inside of Analysis Services, there are all these sophisticated model viewers. And one of the things that I think is just great and was such a huge customer request in the previous version is these are great, but how do end users see them? Well, watch this. If I go into a Browse and I go into customer clusters, look what I have inside of here.
My.
Oh no,
awesome.
You're kidding!
I have
I'm
the
clapping.
I know, yeah. This to me is the big woo. I mean, this is a pretty big deal. And let me find the one that I like the most. Certain of these, let's see if I can.
Wow, this is amazing.
Okay, so if I go into the cluster profile. Okay, if I go into the cluster profile, what this is showing me is for each of the groupings, what are the most relevant things. Now, note this little button here. If I say copy to Excel, it has to think about it for a minute, but it's going to take this information and put it into Excel.
Oh my gosh.
And now I can, yeah, it is.
That's incredible.
I think so. This to me is one of the best features because you've got all the power of these very, very sophisticated viewers, and you can work with them right inside of Excel. So there's our dependency network that we saw earlier, and you can then copy it to Excel. So it's full integration.
Think about how many times people have copied and pasted raw data into Excel and tried to do what we're doing. Or made connections to OLTP databases and tried to create some kind of meaningful data analysis. Yeah, this is incredible. So let me just, we got a couple of questions in the queue. Can I ask you, Lynn, while you're working on that?
Sure.
Karen has actually a good comment here in that in Office 2003, people can still create local cubes. Can you talk about that at all,
Sure.
Lynn?
Sure. What a local cube is the .cub file, and this is related to, let me just give you guys a visual. This is related to the, let me go over here, a cube, so not data mining model. And what it allows end users to do is to take a subset of cube data with them, and it's a great feature.
Okay.
So, and that is unchanged.
Okay.
You can still do that in 2007.
Okay, great. And here's another question from Caesar. Does the trace show, back when you were doing that trace, does it show the actual MDX statement sent back to the server?
Yes. Now, in the case of data mining, it's a different language. So I guess the answer would be for data mining, no, because data mining doesn't use MDX. Data mining uses, confusingly, you ready for this? DMX, data mining extensions.
DMX.
Okay.
Now MDX, multidimensional.
MDX is analysis services.
Right.
And DMX is data mining.
That's right. Okay. So DMX is more T-SQL-like.
Gotcha.
Okay, because it's a flattened structure, whereas MDX, or multidimensional expressions, it's sort of like SQL, but because you're going against a multidimensional structure, it's really not.
Right.
So in order to see both, because maybe that's more fully answering his question, you would use SQL Server Profiler.
Okay, great.
Oh, did you see the question that just popped up? Karen's doing a lot of, not just questions, but some good tips.
Karen is awesome. Maybe we should have Karen on as a guest.
So Karen now is saying that there may be some security risks associated with local cubes and models that you might.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah. And obviously, this is your enterprise data. So like any data solution, security consideration is paramount. So in some situations, I have had clients that would not allow local cubes for exactly that reason, because you have a copy of the data on your laptop. Now, depending on what operating system you're using on your laptop, if you're using Vista, for example, you have, if you're using something like Vista Enterprise, you have some new security capabilities like BitLocker, which can mitigate that to some extent. And if you're not familiar with what BitLocker is, it's the ability to basically secure your information, irregardless if someone steals your laptop.
Right, from a very low level.
And pretty difficult to, almost nearly impossible to defeat, even if somebody steals your laptop. So, that would be a potential way to mitigate it. Security considerations are very, very, very important, and what we've done is we've actually enhanced the security model inside of analysis services. This is assuming that the clients are Windows clients, and we have the ability to create security roles that hook right into Active Directory users and groups and are very, very granular.
Oh, great.
All the way down, actually, on a cube to an individual cell. So you can actually go all the way down, and you can, as it says here, allow reading of cells contingent on cell security, so on and so forth. And it goes as well for data mining. So security planning is extremely important, just like in any database solution.
Awesome, awesome. Lynn, this is great stuff. So it's about 5 of. Do you have anything else really important, top of mind, some other priorities that you really wanted to talk about and share today?
Well, the biggest thing that I want to impart to the audience is, because I continually found this in my consulting business, if you own SQL Server 2005 Standard or Enterprise, you own these products.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, don't realize that.
Yep. And the other thing is, a lot of people don't realize how much faster analysis services is. As a baseline, analysis services queries that are built on correctly structured cubes, and correctly structured is important, run 1,000% faster, as in 1,000 than queries against OLTP. And who doesn't want to have faster reports?
Wow. Yeah,
who doesn't want that?
That is an incredible measurement. Comparison.
Yeah. So the learning curve is important to be considered. However, the return that you can get is very, very significant. So it's really just a question of take the time to look at the tools because you own them.
Yeah, right. And they're free.
Yeah.
If you own SQL Server.
Yeah.
That's true.
A lot of people don't realize, when I did the reporting services series, that was, people's first, well, how do I buy this? I said, well, you have it. There is some version of that inherent in every version of SQL Server.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say is to get started, because so many people ask me, well, this is great, but how do I start? Load up the samples.
Yep.
The samples are very, very rich and very powerful. And in fact, I wrote my entire book based on the samples.
Yep, great advice.
Yeah, that's how powerful they are.
And the awesome thing about that is that people can go back and replicate those examples. So that's great. So there's a question here from Mark. He asks, is the Excel DM data mining also available in SharePoint 2007 Excel services?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Yes, I didn't take any time in today's presentation, but probably will be doing some more webcasts on BI topics. And SharePoint 2007 has a huge amount of enhancements to support the whole BI stack, and Excel services is really just one of those. So the short answer to your question is yes.
Well, maybe we can have a future webcast that talks about that.
Future Geekspeak? That sounds a good setup right there.
Great.
We'll also track down a link to that and put it on the Geekspeak blog.
Awesome. So there is, great. Karen's sharing another resource with us. We'll go ahead and post that out. And if you have any questions, we've got a couple of minutes left here, folks. So if you want to ask Lynn anything else, please go ahead and get your questions in now. We've got a slide up with all of the blog URLs in case you want to visit those blogs. And as Glenn was mentioning, we'll gather up a bunch of resources and post them on the Geekspeak blog there. And then, of course, here is Lynn's blog. And if any of you are out in Southern California, keep your eyes peeled for any MSDN events that Lynn might be doing in the area.
Yeah, one thing I want to share with the group, if anyone is Southern California based, I will be doing presentations to local user groups and other just groups on BI topics. Also, there is the first ever Microsoft BI conference coming up in May, and I will be up at that conference. I'm going to be doing Chalk Talk, and I'll be signing my book up there.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah, and that's I don't remember the link, but we'll put that up again as well. It's the first ever complete BI conference. So for those of you who really are interested in learning more about the topic, it's 2-3 days up in Redmond.
That's great. So will you have information on your blog about that,
Yep.
Lynn?
Yes, I will.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, Lynn, I want to really thank you for being our guest today and sharing all this great BI. I'm really excited. I got very excited to see those new tools, and I think we'll have to follow up maybe with another Geekspeak on this, because there's obviously a lot there. There's no way to really talk about everything in such a short amount of time. But
great. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being on, and great luck with the book. I'm sure it will do really well. I can't wait to see it. And with that, Glenn, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure. Well, I was just going to do some final wrap-up and thank everyone. And again, check the Geekspeak blog in here. We've got some great Geekspeaks coming up in April. And also the links for today's Geekspeak, we'll get those up there probably by the end of today or tomorrow. And at that point, that sort of formally wraps it up, and I'll turn it back over to Craig.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you, Glenn, Susan, and Lynn, for your presentations today. No, excuse me. I would like to share some additional resources with our MSDN crowd before we head out here. If anyone does have any remaining questions or concerns, feel free to go ahead and ask OA. Simply type your question in next to the Ask button, and then simply click that Ask button. As I mentioned earlier, you can view a replay of today's live event or register for some upcoming webcasts by going to www.microsoft.com/webcast. The streaming media replay and downloadable WMV file will be available within 24 hours. I am going to be providing a survey for today's event in just a moment here. And if you could, I would like to encourage everyone to go ahead and take a minute to fill out today's survey. The feedback and comments that you can provide just let us create some better webcasts for you, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. Not only that, but by attending this webcast, which you all have obviously done at this point, and submitting the evaluation, which we will get into in seconds, you will be entered to win a 30 gigabyte Zoom digital media player. So just by taking a few minutes out of your day, you have an opportunity to win some pretty neat hardware. With that, if you could just go ahead, follow the links that are provided in your interface right now, and take a few moments to complete today's evaluation. Again, your comments are quite valuable. It doesn't appear that we have any questions pending at this time, but we will remain online for the next several moments. So while you're filling out your survey, if something comes up, feel free to go ahead and ask your question, and we will respond to them via the question and answer text window. With that, I would like to extend a very special thank you to Glen, Susan, and Lynn for their presentations today. I also would like to thank everyone for coming out to today's webcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to conclude our MSDN program, but we hope to see you again soon. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.